Welcome back, everybody, to Two Ball, Two Bold, episode 15,
16.
16, where we are continuing to do overs and unders. I am Marshon Parker.
And I'm Nathan Tomlin. And like Marshon said, we're going through our NFL predictions in terms of over-unders for all the teams. Just kind of giving a little rehash of what we think the teams are going to do, how they're going to do based on the schedule. So this week this episode, we do have the AFC and NFC South. So again, there's 17 games, and so for the AFC South, they do play the AFC East. They play obviously each other twice. They play the NFC North, and then they play the NFC East team of equal standing, and then they play the other last two games are the AFC teams in the AFC North and West of equal standing from last year. So I'll start it with Houston, who won the AFC South last year. A little bit of a surprise. Rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, did very well. Last year won the division. They're over under this year to start off is 9.5. 9.5. Sorry, 9.5. I actually have them going under, just barely. I have them at 9-8. They were 10-7 last season, so the AFC and NFC North. We did talk about a little bit about the Packers and how you felt that the Packers were going to take a step back, not because the team itself, but just they were going to be a little short of expectations. That's how I feel with Houston. Big part of that is the schedule, right? So the AFC East, if healthy, has three very good teams in the Bills, the Jets, and the Dolphins. The NFC North, has some pretty good teams. I mean, Detroit's obviously very good. Green Bay's a tough game. And Chicago, we really don't really know about Chicago yet, but that could be an interesting team as well. The NFC East team they have to play is Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't gone to the East divisions yet, but Dallas is an interesting team, as well. A little interstate rivalry there. And then the other two AFC teams that they have to play, man, they have to play Kansas City and Baltimore, which to me are two losses. And then against the AFC East, I mean, they beat the Patriots, but they could conceivably lose the other three. And that puts them at 1-5, in those games, in conference games. So to hit the over, they would have to go, 9-2 against the NFC North, the NFC North, Dallas, and their division. And I don't see that happening. I see them losing more than a couple out of that. Their bye week is week 14, which is the last bye week. Their last four games, their last games against Tennessee, at Tennessee, so they'll probably win that one. But their three games prior to that are home against Miami, at Kansas City, and home against Baltimore. They could be on a 3-game losing streak going into that last game. That's tough. It's a very tough schedule. I like what they did in the offseason. I think actually on paper they probably got better, but I think their record is going to get worse just because of the schedule. Last year they had one of the easiest schedules. This year they've tied for fourth strength of schedule at 526, and a big part of that is the the teams they have to play. And I honestly, I'm a huge fan of the trade that they made for Stephon Diggs, because it was a low risk, high reward. Not only did they trade, I think it was a 4th-round pick for Diggs, which the Texans do have quite a few picks.
Mm-hmm.
So that trade, to me, I think Diggs is worth probably more than that. And I love what they did in terms of negating the final year of his contract and adding more guaranteed money to this year. Because they have the cap space, right? Stroud's on a rookie contract, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Damian Pierce, On defense, Will Anderson's still on a rookie contract. I mean, they have guys that are relatively inexpensive for the production that they're given. And Stephon Diggs, I think, just like when he went to Buffalo, he's going to come out like gangbusters. He has a tendency, and I say that tendency because he's been on 2 teams and he's wore his welcome both times. But he's been there for a little bit. Worst case scenario, he's unhappy from the get-go with not getting enough targets. And you trade him before the trade deadline to a team that may have a wide receiver hurt or may feel like they're one wide receiver away from getting over the top. And you trade him and you recoup a 5th or 6th round pick. And then you essentially traded a 4th round pick for a 6th round pick. You took a shot, didn't work out. That's worst case scenario. Best case scenario, he balls, right? He balls out with Nico Collins on the other side, Tank Dell in the slot. Dalton Schultz is a solid tight end. They signed Joe Mixon to complement Dameon Pierce, and now not being a number 1 back and kind of being a committee running back, I think Mixon will be more efficient than he's been in years. They have their offensive line, I think, could use some help. I don't think it's great, other than Tunzel. But Diggs could conceivably have a great year, and then they could, they have options. They could let him walk, or, they could front load a contract, right? These receivers are all about annual value, right? They want to be highest paid. You could give him a 4-year, let's say, $140 million contract with $80 million guaranteed, and that $80 million is in the first 2 years, and you're fine on the salary cap because you're not paying Stroud, you're not paying Anderson, you're not paying Nico Collins yet. So you're able to do that, and really you're signing him to a 2-year contract, and after 2 years you can cut ties, right? So I really liked that deal. I think it's going to help him a lot. I love DeMeco Ryans as a coach. I think he's a fantastic coach. I do have the game to watch for them being at Jacksonville week 13, because those are 2 teams that I think are very interesting. Their seasons can go a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's the second meeting between these 2, but for Texans, I already talked about the last 4 games. They're probably going 1-3. This is at Jacksonville. They do play week 4 in Houston. Jacksonville's coming off a bye. They're at home. That's a huge game because I think Houston will win in Houston. I think they have to win that game if they're going to win the division. Because if they lose that game, like I said, I think they're losing the next 3 before finishing up at Tennessee. So it's going to be huge for seeding. And it's going to be huge for the division. And then the player of the year, the player to win an award for a player of the year, actually went with another guy that they signed on the defensive side that I didn't talk about, and that's Daniil Hunter, the defensive player of the year. He's been quietly one of the best pass rushers in the game over the last 5 years or so. And him and Will Anderson on the edges, that's scary. And if they can build leads, they're going to be a handful to deal with. But this is a guy that gets 12 to 15 sacks every year, and Houston's going to be good enough to where they're going to have players that if they stand out, they'll get in the award conversation. And I think he's the one that would be in
it. I'm going over with them. I really like their roster. I really like CJ Stroud. I like the coaching. I don't see any scenario where Stephon Diggs is not on his behavior, because he understands his next contract is not only going to be tied to his production, but it's going to be tied to what the team and, more importantly, the league perceives as his ability to be able to stay down. People understand that he's not in Buffalo because he wasn't happy, and this will be organization number 3 that he would leave because of him being unhappy. And at that point now, it's just an obvious trend. And look, we've seen this happen with T.O. We've seen nobody's above it. Nobody's above it. And Stephon Diggs, as good as he is, we've seen better receivers basically get washed out of the league because the trend was that they just can't be happy,
Mhm.
you know. And he can get to a point where the teams that are extremely good don't want to have him around, and they're not going to pay him. And the teams that are not good won't pay him, because if you're not good, why would you pay a 30-plus-year-old receiver? It doesn't make any sense. So I just don't see any scenario where he's not on his best behavior,
Mhm.
um, which I think is going to allow for him to be very productive. But even as productive as he is, Nico Collins and Tank Dell are really good. Dalton Schultz is really good. Joe Mixon out of the backfield is really good. They're going to spread the ball around a lot,
Mhm.
so it's going to be a test for him because he's not getting 16, 17 targets a game. It's just not going to happen there. And I don't, I think he's going to be very productive. I think the offense is going to be productive. I think their floor is 10 games. I wouldn't be
Mhm.
shocked if I really do, because I think some of these games, especially like towards the end of the schedule, they're beating Miami. They're going to beat Miami. Um, and would I be shocked if they won? They're not going to beat both Baltimore and Kansas City, but I wouldn't be shocked if they got one of those. I wouldn't be. But even if they lose both of those, there's still a scenario where they can win 10 to 11 games. And a lot of it just has to do with the fact that I just, watching CJ Stroud, I just don't think this is going to be a 1 year thing.
Mhm.
I think he's got it. I think he really has it. And Will Anderson is, I think, going to be the next premier Alabama pass rusher that we talk about for years to come. They're going to win the division. I do think this is going to be a tougher division than a lot of people probably think. It's because so far that we've been doing this exercise, I think the Texans, they probably have the most exciting schedule. I mean,
Mhm.
when you look at
Mhm.
now, it helps when you have a young quarterback that everybody wants to see. But I mean, look at this. Like you know, week one, it's the Colts. Now I know that the Colts are obviously in division, but that's going to be intriguing. CJ Stroud versus Anthony Richardson. Then you got, and a lot of it is the quarterback that they're playing, but him versus Caleb Williams. We talked about that when we talked about Chicago. It'll be interesting to see him against Trevor Lawrence twice a year. The game against the Bills and Josh Allen. And then you've got the Packer game where they're going to love. When you have a young quarterback and you have all these intriguing teams on the schedule, and then you end it with the last three of the four, I mean, heck, the Titans might even be intriguing. I think Will Levis has potential, and we'll get to that later. But the last three of the four, you've got Miami versus Houston. That's going to be an interesting game. That Miami Dolphins offense is going to be explosive. Kansas City Chiefs is going to be interesting in any game they play, and then Baltimore. Let's see how C.J. Stroud looks against that defense, and let's see how Lamar
Mhm.
Jackson looks against Texas defense. They have a very intriguing schedule, but again, I think their floor is 10 wins. And I think last year they went 10 or 11.
10. 10-7.
Okay, so their floor is 10, and they would, I could see them having the same record as last year, being a exceedingly better team. You
Mhm.
know, and it's just because of the schedule. But I could see C.J. Stroud much better. I could see Will Anderson being much better. The coach will have 1 year under his belt. I'm a big D'Amico Ryans fan. I think he's one thing that people forget. You have to be strategic and you have to be all these different things. But at the heart of being a head coach is you got to be a leader of men, and he's that. He's that. So, yeah, I see them. Their floor is 10-7. I can see their ceiling at 11-6. C.J. Stroud, I can see him getting some MVP run, especially if they do win 11 games, or if some way they find a way to win 12 games. And I think Will Anderson has a great chance to have a bigger sack production season, as well as forced fumbles, and maybe he's in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. I think I am glad you brought up Danielle Hunter. He's been an excellent pass rusher for I think the better part about 4 years.
Mm.
Hasn't been getting a lot of run as far as attention on those Minnesota Viking teams, but he's been a absolute baller. So
He's
I
going to
think
make Will Anderson better too.
he's going to make him
Yeah.
absolutely better because
Hmm.
he's going to get to see single coverage, right? He's not going to be able to get double teams as much, and that's one of the reasons why I do think he's going to have a lot higher production level. So that would be my predictions for them.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to say about CJ Stroud,
Mhm.
I don't think he's a 1 year wonder either. The game
Mhm.
he had against Georgia in the semifinals, that was an NFL defense.
Oh
Every
man,
guy that was playing on that team is playing on Sundays now
yeah.
or will be next year because they're still in school.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just Marvin Harrison Jr. And I get Ohio State has great receivers and they have
Yeah.
first round receivers all over the field. His decision making is fantastic. However, he's not going to have a 1% interception rate again. That
No.
will go up. He will
Yeah.
regress towards the mean, and they're playing better talent.
Hmm.
So that's to me, yeah. Like I said, I picked them to go under at 9-8, and I think they're a better team. I think they're a better team, and they'll have a worse record because the schedule that they have a gauntlet of a schedule, man. Because even part of their strength of schedule, the Colts, right? Anthony Richardson didn't play games. If he's healthy, they're going to be better than they were last year. I mean, the Jets, obviously, their schedule doesn't reflect the team that they have now because Aaron Rodgers didn't play, right?
Hmm.
So their strength of schedule is harder than what it is on paper, um, in my opinion. And but they are going to be interesting. I think they're a very good team too. The AFC to me is stacked. I think the AFC has more depth than the NFC. I
Better
think the AFC
quarterbacks.
overall has exactly is
Yeah. I mean,
definitely
yeah.
overall you know much better talent. So the next team who finished second last year was Jacksonville Jaguars. Their over under is 8.5, and their strength schedule is tied for eighth at 512. And I actually have them going over, but at 9-8 also. So they were 9-8 last year as well. Their bye week is 12. Now they have a difficult first 4 games, and this is going to decide their season very quickly, right? Trevor Lawrence just got paid. Let's see how Trevor Lawrence does. But they start out at Miami, which isn't too far of a road game,
Hmm.
versus Cleveland at home, and great defense. We talked about Cleveland before. At Buffalo, and then huge one at Houston. And their toughest opponents overall are on the road because their 2 other toughest opponents, the NFC East team they play is Philly. They're in Philly. And the NFC North, they do play at Detroit as well. So they play their tougher opponents on the road. Now, the AFC West team they get is the Raiders because the Raiders
Hmm.
finished second. Um, so, again, if you look at the AFC teams that they get to play, they get Cleveland and the Raiders versus Houston gets Baltimore and Kansas City, right? And then if you look at the NFC team, they get Philly, Houston gets Dallas. So I think Philly's better than Dallas. We'll get to that in another episode. But, so the teams that they play that are different, I think Jacksonville has slightly easier because the other 2 AFC teams are easier games, right? Um, they're an interesting team too. I think they have a lot of good young talent on defense as well as on offense. Um, to me, it's all about Trevor Lawrence, man, and he's got to cut down on his turnovers. Jacksonville is such a perplexing team. You will watch them sometimes and be like, dude, this team is fire. And there will be other games and you'll be like, this team is a dumpster fire. And there's like no in between with them. They're either, man, they look good, or holy crap, they look like trash, right? And a lot of that is Trevor Lawrence because Trevor Lawrence has a tendency to turn the ball over and he's got to stop. He's got to stop. That being said, their games to watch, to me, it's game 4 at Houston because that beginning stretch for them is so difficult. 3 of 4 on the road, and the 3 road teams they play are difficult. Now, the good thing is they play Buffalo early, so they're not playing in cold weather, but that's still a tough game, right?
Mm-hmm.
That game at Houston, they could end up conceivably being 0-4, and Houston could be 3-1 or 4-0 at that time. They're done. They're out. They're out. They're probably not making the playoffs, period, at 0-4, but then they're definitely out of the division. They have to win that game. They have to win that game if those are what the records are going into that one. So I think that's a huge one. And then player to win the award, we're sticking with defense. Josh Hines Allen, right? Just changed his name, added his mother's last name, who apparently they have a huge lineage of athletes on his mother's
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, he had a great rookie year, 10.5 sacks or something like, which is phenomenal for a rookie, right? If you get double-digit sacks as a rookie, that's great because the speed is so quick. You mentioned Will Anderson. Will Anderson, look at last year how many times he was just late. As years progress, instead of him just being late, those quarterback hurries and hits will turn into sacks. Josh Allen, it finally hit last year, 17.5 sacks.
Yeah.
I think Jacksonville has. I don't think offensively they have anybody that's going to. I don't think Lawrence is there yet. He would have to have just an absolute flash in the pan year. So I do think their defense has good pieces and a lot of good young pieces, and I think their defense is good enough to where Josh Hines Allen could be that guy.
The Jaguars, I was a big I'm a big Lawrence believer, and I was really disappointed last year because for me, my hot take was that, going into next season was that by the end of the year, Trevor Lawrence was going to be recognized as a top 3 quarterback.
He got
And
paid
he
like
didn't
one.
show. He sure got paid like one, but he didn't play like one.
Mm.
And watching play last year, it just seemed lethargic, and it just didn't seem like I don't, aside from flashes so far in his career, we haven't seen the guy that we thought we were going to see going into the NFL. I mean, he's big, he's got a strong arm, he's athletic, and we're just not seeing it. And I thought Ridley would help a lot because Ridley's a really good receiver. I like him a lot, and I thought he would help a lot. They signed a lot of weapons for him. They signed Kirk. I like their running backs. They've got a solid offensive line. Thought, hey, ever since they got rid of Urban Meyer, I figured, okay, every year is gonna be better and better. And even the year that he played good, he played good the whole season. Which season I believe number 2. But even with that being said, I don't see him regressing. I see him having a much better year, which leads me to believe that they're going to win 9 games, which will be over. But I don't see them winning that division. I just can't see them winning that division over Houston. Now, the game for them, in my mind, is December 15th versus the Jets. And the reason I picked that game is because if they win that game, they have a chance to season 5. So you figure you have the Titans, Jets, Raiders, Titans again, Colts. So I think if they get that Jets game, they've got a good chance to win 5 in the season, 5 straight, which could definitely change the trajectory of the season. And you figure, hey, if at that point, then if they've made the playoffs,
And those are
feeling
all
pretty
AFC
good.
games too.
Yeah,
So tiebreakers come into play.
they're feeling at that point. So that's why I had that week. What would that be? 17, 16, 15, 14. Week 14, December 15th against the Jets.
No, later than that. Week 15 because of the bye.
15, 16, 17. You're right.
Yeah.
So that's what I had. And then as far as, I mean, look, there's a There's a shot in the dark. I wouldn't put any money on it, but there's a shot in the dark that Trevor Lawrence like just really pops this year, and he would be an MVP. Because he's a quarterback, and because we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he came into the league with so much hype. When guys come in the league like this, most times we're hoping and rooting.
Mhm.
So if he had the type of say if he had the type of year CJ Stroud had last year, if he had that this year with with all the hype and stuff that he's had coming into the NFL, he could win MVP. He wouldn't need to have a landmark year to win MVP. You have to have a really good year, and their record exceeds our expectations because we want him to do well. He looks like what everybody thinks a quarterback should look like. He
Mhm.
came in the league as the greatest prospect since Andrew Luck. So people want him to do well, because they want to basically they want to be right on their takes. I want to be right on my take. I thought he was going to be outstanding, but then again, I don't care enough. And then I agree with you that Josh. Let me say his whole name correct. Josh Hines Allen. I'm sure he got extremely tired of the whole. He's not Josh Allen, but he's
Number
he's
7 pick.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell me about it. And he's been balling. He has been
Mhm.
absolutely balling. So there is, if they had a outstanding year and they exceeded expectations, yeah, he's got a chance at defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so go to the next team, which is Indianapolis. Another one that's interesting. They're over under also 8.5. But their strength of schedule all the way down, tied for 21st at 491. Um, in large part, the NFC East, obviously, the two bottom feeders are not good. They get the Giants as the NFC East team that they play, and then they do get the Chargers. I'm sorry, they get the Broncos,
Mm.
um, and then they also get the from the AFC North. They do get the Steelers. Um, so they miss out on the Bengals, Ravens, and they miss out on the better teams in the AFC West. They get the worst team, in my opinion, in the AFC West. They get, in my opinion, the worst team in the AFC North, or battling with Cleveland for worst team. Elite defense, not very good offense, and then they get, I think, what will be the worst team in the NFC East. I have them over. Now, I will preface this. This is based on Anthony Richardson playing, obviously.
Yeah.
He's a problem. I think their ceiling is probably 12 wins. Okay. And I think their floor, if he plays the full season, is 9. So I think they go I think they're gonna go 9-8. Because he's gonna have bumps in the road, things of that sort.
Mhm.
But their ceiling's very high. His accuracy is going to be key. Jonathan Taylor, look, I get it's been now 2 years removed from that massive year he had. But if
Mhm.
you look at his advanced metrics last year, after he came back from the injury, the contract dispute, and all that, his yards after contact was right on par with what it was his first 2 years in the league. His yards before contact was lower, right? Which means that that's part of the offensive line. Is our offensive line not as good as what it was the first couple years in the league? His broken tackles per rushing attempt was right on par with what it was. So really, his advanced metrics in terms of running and how he was running was the same. He was getting less carries, obviously coming back. He had the injury the year before. He had the contract dispute. They weren't going to give him 25 carries. And I don't think their line was as good. And then you're playing with the back quarterback, Gardner Minshew, the whole year. So there were other aspects, right, that kind of affected that. They drafted defense. They drafted the first defensive player off the board. They got a defensive pass rusher who they feel is going to be a legit, and I'm going to butcher his name, man. Latu, or however you say it at UCLA, elite pass rusher in college, um, will help them right off the bat. But it's all about Anthony Richardson, man. It's all about Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
They also have the last bye in bye week 14. But coming out of that, they're going to win, or they should win. They'll be favored 3 games at Denver versus Tennessee at home, at the Giants, and they finish up against Jacksonville at home. Now, they also have a favorable start to the season in terms of they play 3 of the first 4 games at home. They do start, as you mentioned earlier, at home against Houston, but they are at home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of tape on Anthony Richardson. And how has he progressed from week, was it 3 last year that he got hurt? 3 or 4?
Up in 3 or 4, yeah.
At Green Bay, then home against Chicago, which will be a very interesting game, and home against Pittsburgh with a very good defense. So not the easiest schedule in terms of teams, but favorable because they're at home. So if they could even go 2-2 there, they're finishing at worst 3-1 if everyone's healthy. That puts them at 5-3 right there, and then they have the middle of the season, to win 4 games to go over. So I think they're able to do that. My games to watch, I bookended the season for them. Week 1 versus Houston, I think that's going to be a good barometer to see how is Anthony Richardson. And Week 18 versus Jacksonville, because I do think, again, I have all 3 of these teams going around the same record within a game or 2 of each other. That game could be the difference between making the playoffs and not. It could decide a division. Could be one of those where, remember the Lions beat the Packers a couple years ago, where the Lions had nothing to play for, but the Packers, they win, they're in. Could be something like that for one of these teams. But I think both those games are going to be huge, and they're both at home for them. So even though they may not be favored, Week 18, you'd have to see. It depends on how the season goes. Week 1, they definitely won't be. They could win those games, And again, I've talked about before, in division games, you got to win the home games. Player to win the award, I have 3 different guys, actually. I have Latu's Defensive Rookie of the Year. Again, first defensive player picked. He's going to play. He's going to get opportunities. And then Anthony Richardson or Jonathan Taylor is Comeback Player of the Year. Either one of them get it. And to preface this, quarterbacks have won it in their second year.
Yeah.
Look at Joe Burrow, right?
Yeah.
Guy that plays, and Burrow played more games than Richardson did. So there is precedence to that. We'll see, but those are my players that I think would be most likely to win the award.
I'll tell you one funny thing. When you get a chance, go look at Jonathan Taylor's college numbers.
Oh, he's insane. He's like top 10 all time in rushing yards.
He might be the most underrated great college player of all time.
He's only 25 too.
Yeah.
He's young. He's young. Yeah.
It's and I think a lot of it is people weren't paying attention because he's at Wisconsin, but meanwhile he's just murdering the Big Ten. But the Colts are in a weird position with me. I really like Anthony Richardson's potential, and I remember everybody was trying to think of his comp, and this will show you what I think of him, based on the fact that how I feel about this player. If he has the right coaching, I'm not saying it's going to happen. If he has the right coaching, I think he could be Josh Allen. I mean, they got the same body type.
Faster.
Josh Allen is a lot faster.
Anthony Richardson's straight line fast, though, man.
Yeah, he is. But
he's not as big as Josh Allen, though.
He's wait till he gets his man body a little bit more. Anthony Richardson is a big guy. He's a big guy. But they're both big guys, strong arm. The only thing is, Josh Allen has proven to be durable. We have to see with Anthony Richardson. I think they're going to be under, but I think, and I respectfully say this, they're going to be under because the over-under is what, 7.5?
It's 8.5.
8.5. Yeah, they're definitely going to be under. Because I think what's going to happen with them is this. I think they're going to surprise a lot of teams early. because I do believe they're going to use Anthony Richardson in a way where almost street ball, where it's like, hey, just
Mhm.
win us some games. Just win us some games. You know,
Tim Tebow
do
status,
e-
more talent.
except a lot more talented, you
Yeah.
know. And I think Anthony Richardson is going to prove that he can do that. But as the season goes along, and coaches have more time to prep for him and kind of pick up his tendencies and things like that, see them
More film.
losing some games towards the end of the year that people may not predict. And the thing with them is, I think they're going to be one of those teams that going into the following season, people are going to be scared about because they are going to. There's going to be, I think, a lot of close games with them. It's going to be a lot of close
Mhm.
games where they have the opportunity to learn from those mistakes and learn maybe then how to win the following season. But I see them winning 7 games. I see them winning 7 games. I see them being in the vast majority of games, and I would see it's going to be one of two scenarios. Either I'll put it to you this way: if you're a fantasy football, draft Anthony Richardson.
Mhm.
That should be he should be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. But if he proves to be able to play the vast majority of games, the league should be nervous going into 2025 because they have a really good line. Quentin Nelson is he's probably the best guard in the league. That guy's he, he's fun to
Second
watch as an
best.
offensive lineman. Behind who, Martin?
Yeah.
I'm factoring in age and everything like that, but I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah. Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair
So,
enough.
but so in as far as awards, I mean, because I do think Anthony Richardson is going to put up a lot of numbers, and I think him and Jonathan Taylor are going to prove to be a good duo. One of them could win comeback player of the year, although I think comeback player of the year you can pretty much, you know, um, put that in the bag. Player's going to get his second comeback player of the year award. I strongly believe that. So yeah, I mean the game of the year with them, they're going to be exciting. So
Mhm.
if somebody just wants to watch exciting football, I think
Week
they're
3.
going to be a team to watch. Now, I would be the for me the game I think is intriguing, and from just an entertainment standpoint, is the game against the Bills
Mhm.
because it's on November 10th, which means it's what, week 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, the week 11, because I think there is a chance that you could be looking at Josh Allen versus young Josh Allen. So I think that would be an intriguing game to watch, but I think the majority of the year for them is going to be exciting football. Uh, but unfortunately, it's not going to mature into enough wins for them to be a playoff contender.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And the last team is Tennessee. Finished last year in the division. They're over under 6.5. Now their strength of schedule is also tied for 21st at 491. The teams that they have to play, the other teams don't play. The NFC East team they have to play is Washington. The AFC West team they have to play is the Chargers, who we've already talked about how we both feel about the Chargers this year. And then the AFC North team they have to play is the Bengals. Whereas if Burrow's back, that's 3 games I don't think Tennessee wins. I have them going under. Um, I don't know what their direction is, to be 100% honest with you. They drafted a right tackle as a top, what was it, top 7th pick overall? Guy that's
Yeah,
a
top
right
10 pick. Yeah.
tackle, which
Mm-hmm.
is an interesting position to draft 7th. Um, Wrong side of the line when you have a right-handed quarterback. Anyway,
Yeah.
put it that way. Um, I think this year is here. You go, Will Levis. Prove to us that we should stick with you.
Yes.
This is his audition. He gets a full season. Obviously, Malik Willis ain't it. They drafted him in the third round, I think it was, a few years back. He's done. So Will Levis, you're the quarterback all year. Show us what you got. And they're going to decide, do we build around him or do we reset the quarterback position?
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of me believes they do believe in Will Levis because they gave Calvin Ridley way too much money.
I didn't understand that.
They have veteran receivers. DeAndre Hopkins, the other one. Now he's out for the rest of preseason. Maybe if the first couple weeks of the season. They signed Tony Pollard, who proved he can't be an every down back. Some guys are just, they're good when they get 10 touches. They're super explosive, but when you have to give them the ball all the time, they're just not there. Their offensive line has aged. They gave Lloyd Cushenberry at center, who was a Broncos center. I know him very well. Solid center. He's the highest paid center in the NFL now. Bunch of money. I don't know what they're doing. I don't really understand. I don't think they're going to be fun to watch. I think they're going to be pretty boring. I wouldn't draft any of their guys for fantasy unless, Ridley fell to like the 9th or 10th round. I mean, you take him because he's the number one wide receiver on the team, I guess. I'd stay away from Pollard. He'd be a guy you'd stash on the bench that you'd have to play when you have a guy on a bye week. Their game to watch is week 1 at Chicago because it's Caleb Williams' first game. There's literally no reason to watch the Titans this year unless you're a Titan fan. And look, I'm a Bronco fan, and I feel the same. I feel like I don't even want to watch the Broncos. That's my team. At least the Broncos have maybe Bo Nix will play. Will Levis is your quarterback. That's what you're sticking to. Player to win the award. I mean, I just picked their best player and said he ain't gonna win it, but I guess he has the best chance. And that's Jeffrey Simmons, his defensive player of the year. He's one of the best D tackles in the league. He ain't gonna win it because they're not gonna be good. But yeah, I mean, that's all I got on the Titans.
They're going to be way under. They're going to be way under.
Okay.
If they're smart, they're trading DeAndre Hopkins before the trade deadline to some team who.
Dude, I don't know what his value is, man.
I mean, listen, if you could get a 6th for him right now,
I guess.
I don't understand why. I understand why Calvin Ridley signed the contract because they gave him a lot of money, but I don't understand why they would sign him. You sign a receiver to that type of contract I guess I do get it because they need to see if Will Levis is the guy. So I get it. But I think they're going to be bad. And because of that, I mean, I don't really have much good to say about them. And I don't, players, I don't really want to trash them too much. So yeah. I think I have week 8 as a game to watch for them. And the reason being is because as bad as the Patriots is going to be, I think their defense is going to be awesome. I mean, comparatively speaking, awesome for unless well,
Barrymore, man, and Juden.
I just remembered that. Yeah, because that defense was really good last year, and I thought about the fact that they're getting Christian Gonzalez back. I think Christian Gonzalez is going to be a multiple-time Pro Bowler, but it's that might be like a toilet bowl game where it's like the team that loses this is going to be have a top 2 pick. So it's interesting because we've talked about how the AFC is the superior conference, which I agree with because there's
3 of the 4 worst teams.
I was just going to say that I think they might very well have the top 3 picks in that conference as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to go over awards. What's the point? Like, nobody's winning an award there. Yeah. I mean, somebody's going to TV. because they have to. But that's
Yeah,
life.
Jeffrey Simmons will make a Pro Bowl. There's your award.
There we
Um,
go. There we go.
um, so we'll go to the NFC South. So they play the AFC West.
Mhm.
They play the NFC East, and then they play the AFC North team of equal standing. So pretty tough scheduling for the NFC South. So you're going to start us off. So the team that finished first last year was Tampa Bay.
Mhm.
Um, they won the division, and their over under is 7.5. They pretty much stood pat, but they're over under 7.5. Their strength of schedule, believe it or not, and this is because their division was so bad,
Mhm.
and they get to play the Panthers twice, who won 2 games. But their strength of schedule is tied for 27th at 4-7-8, even though they won the division last year. So take it away.
Over. They're going to be over. I think. I think that this division has a good chance to have two playoff teams. Yeah, I said it. I said that. I think this division has the chance to playoff teams. I think they're going to go over. I think that Baker Mayfield is going to prove to be a steady quarterback. Not great, not top 10, but a steady quarterback that you can win with. A lot of their pieces on defense, they're getting some of them are getting older. I know. I think that is a Shaq Barrett. He just retired, didn't
He's retired. Yeah, he had that
he?
tragedy with his
Yeah,
daughter last year too, man.
yeah. That was yeah. Yeah, I can only well, I can't imagine, but
Yeah, a lot of
you
love for
know,
Shaq Barrett, man. He was huge on the Broncos, man. Spelling relief for
yeah.
Vaughn and Ware. Learned from two great edge rushers, two of the best of the generation.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
But they still have really solid pieces. They still have a lot of good defensive players, receivers. Running backs are so-so. I like their young tackle who they just signed to. Evans, like,
Worse.
hey, you can write in pen 1,000 yards. You can write that in marker 1,000 yards, right?
1,000 yards, 8
Uh,
touchdowns
yeah, that's going to
or
happen.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, Devin White is still highly productive, and it's still really good. Vita is still very good. They have a good, solid team, and I believe they're going to finish second in that division. And I believe they're going to be over. They're going to win. Probably. I say their floor is 9 games. I can see a scenario where they win 10, but I think their floor is 9. For them, I'd say the game of the year for them is what did I have on. I had for them. I had the trying to see which because there was.
What team
I mean,
you looking at?
well, I mean, realistic. I mean, can I say two?
Yeah,
Because I think it's
I've
I
said
think it's
2 or 3 sometimes.
I think it's both of the games against the Falcons
Mhm.
because I'll just leave it at that until we get to the Falcons. But I'll say those are the two games that are the must see games.
Mhm.
Is the two matchups on October 3rd and October 27th against the
Weeks 5
Falcons.
and 8. Yeah, they play
Yeah,
early. They get
yeah,
them out of the way
yeah.
early. Yeah,
Oh yeah, they do.
and the player to win the award.
I guess you know. I suppose that there's some scenario Baker Mayfield is a MVP. If so, that means some crazy stuff happened. But you know,
Everyone got hurt.
you know, yeah, yeah. Tell me about it. I don't. I just it's hard because I don't see. I just don't see any
Mhm.
award candidates on. The just yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I had them over as well. I have them probably more realistically going 8 and 9 though because of their
Hmm.
schedule.
Mhm.
They do start 3 of 4 at home. Versus Washington, they'll win that. At Detroit, they'll probably lose that one. Home against Denver, they'll win that, and then home against Philly, which I think is going to be a huge game because 3-1 and 2-2 are different, and that leads me
Yeah.
to their games to watch. Which I had the same thing as you. I have the 2 against Atlanta, Week 5 and Week 8. So if they're 3-1 going into that Week 5 game, that's a lot different than 2-2, especially if you end up losing that, right? But also, um, and I had it the same for the same reasons. Most likely team that they're going to be competing with for the division. I don't think 2 teams get out of here in the playoffs. So I think only the division winner is going to make it. In between those 2 games, they're at New Orleans. I don't think New Orleans is great, but it is a division game on the road. And then they do get Baltimore at home. And then right after the Atlanta game, they play at Kansas City and versus San Francisco.
Mhm.
So they're losing. I don't think they beat Baltimore. I don't think they beat Kansas City. I don't think they beat San Francisco. So those are 3 losses right there. Those 2 games against Atlanta are huge because they don't get to recoup those later in the year. There's, like I said, their schedule's just tough, man. And then, other than the Atlanta games, they could potentially be 3-5 going into their Week 11 bye. So even if they split those games, they'd be 4-6 going into a bye down the stretch. Where Atlanta, we'll get to them in a minute, may have a different record. And playing catch up when you can't gain a whole game on a head to head for the rest of the season is tough. Player to win the award, I'm surprised, and you didn't even mention him when you talked about defensive players. He's their heart and soul of their defense. He's a top 3 safety in the league, Antoine Winfield
On one
Jr.
play.
And he's
Yeah.
the type of safety that would win an award because he's a ball hawk, right? He makes big plays. Again, I don't think he wins it. And there's only been, we've talked about this before, I think 5 safeties in NFL history that have ever won Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's 5. It may even be less than that. But, 2 of them, the only 2 I can think of off the top of my head that were the most recent ones are Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, who are, Ed Reed we've talked about is probably him and Ronnie Lott are the 2 greatest safeties of all time. And Troy Polamalu is on the tier right below them. So, but yeah, so that's what I got for Tampa Bay. I don't see them winning 10 games. I just don't with the schedule. I like Baker. I don't feel like he's good enough to beat a team that's that much better. I mean, they got Philly in the playoffs, but Philly was reeling last year. Philly was just real struggle bussing.
Yeah.
If they would have played Philly earlier in the year, they would have lost by 30 points. Like I don't feel like he's average. He's in the 20s somewhere, low mid 20s in the NFL quarterbacks out of the 32 starters.
I'd put him higher than that.
Nah, he's not top half. I don't think he's a top half starting quarterback in the NFL.
He's somewhere in the teens.
19. Okay, that's pretty much 20, man. So the next team is the New Orleans Saints. Strength of schedule for them is tied for 31st, which is 32 teams in the league. So they're tied for the easiest schedule at 453 strength of schedule. Their over-under is 7.5. They play from the AFC North. They have to play Cleveland. And then from the NFC West, they play the Rams. And from the NFC North, they play the Packers. So go ahead.
They're going to be under. So they're going to be under, but I think one thing that's going to be interesting for them is they may have found their future quarterback. My surprise rookie, I think the guy who's going to turn a lot of heads is, I think, Spencer Rattler is the type of guy who has a better NFL career than he did college career. Because the talent's there. It's It's a matter of, I think the best thing to him was Caleb Williams snatching his job from him.
Mhm.
I think that's the best thing that could have happened to him. And he needed to have his ego deflated a little bit because the arm talent and all that kind of stuff is there. But I mean, anybody who's seen, I can't remember what the high school show is called that he was on Netflix. But anybody who's seen that show or seen anything about him, he was an a-hole. And
Mhm.
and Caleb Williams coming and basically taking his lunch. He drank his milkshake and made him have to transfer to a no shade because they are SEC. They are SEC program, but
Bottom
to
half
transfer
SEC,
to
yeah.
a bottom SEC program when he was a starting quarterback at one of the top 5 to 10
Heisman
premier
U at the
programs.
time.
Yeah, so I think that was good for him, and I think they may have found their future quarterback, but they're still going to go under. They're still going to go under. As much as I love Kamara, I mean, is he ever going to play a full season again the rest of his career? Probably not. I don't know.
But last year he had the suspension, so
He had the
that was a little
suspension.
different.
He had the suspension, but I don't I think he might be getting to that point of it. Interesting stat about him. I think most people wouldn't know. He's never ran for 1,000 yards.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
you got to think his first 4 years in the league. Mark Ingram was actually the
yeah.
main running back. They used Kamara as more of a split end
But still, I think I
slot
think
guy.
I
Hmm.
think if you said that to most football fans, they would be surprised that he's never
Hmm.
ran for 1,000 yards. Um, I think that they will. There's only one team that they're going to be better than in this division.
Hmm.
But like I said, on the bright side, I think there is a chance. There's a chance. I'd say 30% chance that they may have found their quarterback of the future. So if that's the case, you may be able to consider this season a success. I mean, they're not going to win more. I would say 5 wins. You know, uh, you know. I mean, there's really not much else to say about them. I'm not. I guess you could say the game that when I looked at their schedule, the game that intrigued me was Week 5 against the Chiefs, just because I looked at it and
Chiefs.
I said, I'll tell you why. I mean, I had a odd reasonings for it. It's not because they have a chance. I think it's because by week 5, Mr. Rattler, if he wasn't in by week 1, will definitely be in by week 5.
Oh, he's not in week 1. Carr's
And
making too much money. He won't play
man,
week 1. Maybe by week 5, but he ain't in week 1.
that's no,
I'd
no,
say
no.
that right now.
That's yeah. That's what I'm saying. He won't. Well, what I was trying to say is he won't be in by week 1, but he will be in by week 5. Because I'm projecting that they'll be. I think I think there's a chance they're winless by then. I think there's a chance. There's a chance they're 0-4. And the only thing I could think of, because I was trying to think of something that intrigued me about the schedule, and it's like, okay, well, you know, Spencer Rattler's got a little great value Patrick Mahomes to him. So it's like, so maybe we get to see Patrick Mahomes against great value Patrick Mahomes. I'm trying it.
You're
I'm
giving him too
trying.
much props calling him great value Patrick Mahomes, bro.
Uh, I don't know. Okay, goodwill Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. I mean,
God.
hey,
Third world
so.
country Patrick Mahomes, bro.
And then again,
Come on, you're
fine.
comparing him to the best quarterback in the league. Come on.
No, I'm just saying that he's not on his level. He's not that type of quarterback, but he's got a very, very intriguing arm, right? I mean, he's in his best day, he can do some of the throws that Mahomes can do that not many people in the whole world could do. He's not even close to being the quarterback that Patrick
I got
Mahomes
you.
is,
I
but
got you. I got you. It's
like
the
like
curly
like
hair.
he could play Patrick Mahomes on like a light version of Patrick Mahomes.
See, there you go. That's better.
There we go. He's lifetime. He's lifetime biopic Patrick Mahomes. There
No,
we get.
he's
We did
lifetime.
him.
He's lifetime Patrick Mahomes on the biography of Andy Reid, where he's just a side character. All right, now what's your one player that has no chance to win an award, but you're gonna throw out there?
Hey, what the heck? Hey, we'll say Spencer the chest for Rookie of the Year.
Hey, you're the only person that thinks Spencer Rattler's even.
I'll say
Most,
this because I just if we're gonna talk about this team and we don't have much to say, I will say this: Chris Olave is a baller. He's an
oh yeah,
absolute baller. And
Mhm.
and we know if we're gonna talk about the Saints, we got to at least bring him up. That dude is amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's it. That's it for me.
yeah. I mean, I have him under too.
Yeah.
Look, the Saints. I talked about Tennessee not really having a direction. At least they're trying to attempt to see if they have a quarterback.
Yeah.
New Orleans is in salary cap purgatory, man.
Ooh.
Every year they're over by 30, 40 million. They have to keep restructuring these guys. They're old. They don't have a lot of young talent on their team, other than Olave. He's. I don't think Spencer Rattler's it at all. Um, I see what you're saying about potentially starting 0-4. I do. I'm gonna give them some credit. They still do have some good players. I do think they do beat Carolina at home week 1 because I think they're better than Carolina. Because dude, Carolina, oh god, I really don't know. The offensive line's awful on Carolina, and their defense isn't real good either. They have a couple decent pieces, but overall not very good. They're losing at Dallas. They're losing at home against Philly. They're losing in Atlanta, and then they're going to lose in Kansas City. So they're 1-4.
Yeah.
I have two games as a game to watch. One is Week 18 versus Tampa Bay because it might mean something for Tampa Bay, and they have a chance to play spoilers against a division rival. It has nothing to do with New Orleans. It doesn't matter who's playing. That just comes down to is Tampa Bay, is that a win and win the division or win and get in the playoffs game for Tampa Bay? If it is, that's it. That's an enticing game. The other one I have is Week 13 because I think New Orleans is not going to be very good. This is after their bye week, and I think that is when Spencer Rattler actually starts, unless Carr is hurt.
Well, and that's why I
Derek,
say there's a chance for him to be in week 5 because
Derek,
Carr, might get hurt.
yeah, Derek Carr's making too much money for them not to play him.
Yeah.
I think after this year they can kind of get out from it. So I do think Rattler is going to play at some point this year.
Yeah.
That would be a good time because, again, I don't know how the Rams defense is really going to be without Aaron Donald because last year when Aaron Donald wasn't on the field, their defense wasn't great. Again, they're not winning that game, but he has 2 weeks to prepare. And then player to win the award, again, I picked their best player, Chris Olave, as offensive player. Again, not going to win it because he's going to have empty stats. He's probably going to have a lot of catches for 9 yards a catch and not a lot of touchdowns because I really
come on, don't give him 9 yards a catch, man.
No, he'll get more than that because he is explosive and Derek Carr's not terrible.
No,
he's not great, but he's not awful, and he's good for one bomb a game. I'm just kind of messing. But Olave is going to put up numbers. I don't think he's going to have a lot of touchdowns. I don't think New Orleans is going to score a lot of touchdowns.
No.
But I agree. I mean, he's a stud. Hopefully, he gets out of there. So next team we'll go to is home team for us in terms of where we are geographically anyway. The Atlanta Falcons, who have the highest over-under at 9.5. And they are tied with the Saints for the easiest schedule at 453 winning percentage. The teams they play that no one else in the NFC South plays. In the AFC North, they get the Steelers, which is actually week 1. And then in the NFC North, they get the Vikings, who were probably going to be the worst team in that division. And in the NFC West, they are getting the Seahawks. So go ahead.
I'm going over. Going over. And I I think they're going to have 10 to 11 wins. Um, I picked them last year to be the surprise team going into the season, and I believe my prediction would have been correct if Ritter would have just been average. He would have just been average.
Honestly, he could have been slightly below average, and I think they would have been a surprise team.
That and well that and you know they're going to have coaching this year that's not. They had a very intriguing game plan last year. Their game plan was this. They said, "Hey, we've got this stud like Bijan Robinson, and we've got this freaky tight end Kyle Pitts. You know, it would be a great game plan if we didn't give them the ball." So I have a sneaky feeling that that's not going to be the game plan this year. I think Bijan Robinson is going to be a top 3 running back. I think as far as talent goes, at least my top 3 most talented running backs uh, are CMC, Saquon Barkley, and Bijan Robinson. I think all 3 guys are going to have killer years this year. I think Bijan is going to be absolutely awesome. Nobody's going to be complaining about the fact that they spent the first round pick on him last year. I think Kyle Pitts is going to get a chance to show that he is a freak show at tight end. And I think Drake London is going to have a really big year. I even think a guy like his name that they traded for from the Cardinals. I really like him
Moore,
at Purdue. Yeah, I think
Rondell
I
Moore.
believe his first name is Rondell Moore. I think
Hmm.
he's going to be. I think he's going to be sneaky good in the
They
slot.
got Mooney too.
I was going to bring him up next. I think Mooney's going to be. There was so many times where Mooney was wide open, and then he just for him to look back and see Justin Fields running. you got to think. You got to think how frustrating that's got to be for a wide receiver. But I think the Falcons are going to be really good, and I'm not just saying that so that our local, Falcon fan friends are mad at us. I think they're going to be really good. I think in that division. And I think Kirk, I think Kirk Cousins is going to be really good. I think it's going to take him some time to get back to maybe the player he was before, but I don't think he has to be that. I don't have to be pre-injury Kirk Cousins out of the gate. I think he just has to be what I believe he's going to be, which is a quarterback that's not going to make mistakes, that's going to get the ball in the hands of his playmakers. And I anticipate the Falcons winning that division and being good. Game of the year for me would be where is it? I tell you, I'm going to say the second game against the Eagles is intriguing to me because, and
Second game.
let me tell you why. Let me tell you, this week two,
Oh,
week two
week
against
two,
the
week
Eagles.
two, week two.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
They, and we'll talk about this later. I think the Eagles are going to be really good, but that game will be important, I believe, for
Seating.
playoff seeding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I have that game. And then I also look. I'm an old school football fan. Everybody wants to talk quarterbacks and stuff like that. Look, I'm still a linebacker, running back guy, and there's many more matchups you can get that's more intriguing than Bijan versus Saquon. So that stands out to me as a guy who everybody always talks about 90s NBA, but I think 90s NFL was like the peak of football. When the running back was still the king of the hill on the team. So I had that. And then as far as as far as awards would go, I could see a scenario where, well, I mean, I could see a scenario where Raheem Morris wins Coach of the Year.
Hmm.
I could definitely see that. And I could also see a scenario where Bijan is, they don't give running backs MVP anymore. So I could see a scenario where Bijan is Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I got them going over too. Their first 3 games are tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Home against Pittsburgh, and the reason that game's tough is Cousins' first game in
Yeah.
a long time since the injury against a very, very good pass rush and good defense overall. That's why that game's going to be difficult. At Philly is tough.
Mhm.
I do think they lose that one though. Honestly, again, it's on the road and it's still early. Cousins is still getting acclimated. He's not going to play in the preseason, I don't think. And if he does, it's going to be very limited. And then week 3 is home against Kansas City, But after that, it gets a lot easier. And then their
Yes.
last 5 games, their bye week 10, which is kind of in the middle, 9 games before, 8 games after. They play 5 division games. I'm sorry, their bye is week 12. But in the first 10 games, they play 5 division games. So they're pretty much done with their division. They could essentially be, if they take care of business, be 4-1, 5-0 in the division by week 10.
Yeah.
They're going to win a couple other games there too. They could have run away with the division by their bye week. Their last 5 games, they're going to be heavily favored. At
Yes.
Minnesota, at Las Vegas, home against the Giants, at Washington, home against Carolina. They should win all 5 of those games. So that means to go over the rest of the season, they got to go 5-7. And I think they do that. Atlanta is intriguing. I do think they need more pieces on defense to really compete for Super Bowl. So I don't think they're Super Bowl ready yet.
No.
Obviously, everyone's talking about the draft pick of drafting Penix. Now, I read a report that apparently their coach, their general manager, and their owner were all in on it. The personnel, scouting, and everything was shocked. They did let Kirk Cousins know shortly before they did draft Penix, but they felt like they would not pick in the top 10 for the next 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to have a succession plan because of what happened when Matt Ryan essentially, declined. And apparently also, this is league wide. The next couple quarterback draft classes are seen as being very subpar
Mm-hmm.
to where there's maybe 1 or 2 guys per draft class that are even NFL level starting quarterbacks. Now, obviously, that can change as guys. I mean, like Joe Burrow. Who thought Joe Burrow all of a sudden he blows up, right? And
Yeah.
it takes a scene. But so there's a lot of reasons as to why they drafted him. Now, they've already come out and said Michael Penix is backing up Kirk Cousins this year. His job this year is to learn how to be a pro, learn how to be an NFL quarterback, study the game, study Kirk Cousins. Raheem Morris was a defensive position coach on Washington, Kirk Cousins' first 2 years. And apparently
Mm-hmm.
he loves Kirk Cousins. And Raheem Morris is a very big character guy. And a big reason as to why they wanted Kirk Cousins is his character and his leadership and who he is as a person, just as much as his quarterback play, right? Apparently Penix is rooming with Cousins right now for training camp. Kirk Cousins goes to bed at 9:30. He's the earliest one to bed, and I guess Penix is following suit and going to bed. They're together all the time. He's emulating him. Seems like a good relationship. Kirk Cousins' contract is essentially a 2-year contract.
Yeah.
Right, with the possibility of extending out to 4 years. I give Kirk Cousins 2 seasons to get Atlanta to, at the very least, a conference championship game, or year 3 of Michael Penix, he's the starter. Kirk Cousins has 2 years. I don't think they get there this year because, like I said, I still think they need pieces on defense. But year 2, if he does not get them at least to the conference championship game, he's done in Atlanta. Um,
But
game to
look at the
watch.
schedule. They might finish 8-1.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they
Yeah,
play their toughest part of their schedule is the first 3 games,
yeah,
and also coincides with Cousins coming back. So they could start 0-3 and still win the division because
I agree.
their toughest 3 games are those 3 up front, right? Um, game to watch, week 14 in Minnesota. Look, and it's funny because when you look at this, Minnesota could have did what Atlanta did,
Yeah,
right? And Kirk Cousins probably has to feel some sort of way. And I won't say it because he's a consummate professional.
yeah,
But you don't think Minnesota may have said, "Hey, man, we're going to draft a quarterback. That's our plan. We'll sign you to a 2-year fully guaranteed contract like we've been doing." And Kirk Cousins said, "No, I don't want to do that."
reportedly they did. Reportedly,
Right?
that's what
And then
went
Atlanta
on.
goes and does that.
Yeah, yeah,
So it is interesting, but also I think by that point, JJ McCarthy's playing. Unless he really is not ready. I mean, if he is not ready at all, again, we talked about this
mm,
when we talked about the NFC North because JJ
yeah,
McCarthy's age, he's only 21. He doesn't turn
yeah,
22 till January. If he's not ready, they're not gonna force him to play. But if they feel like, hey man, we kind of want to see what he's got, he's going to be playing then. And it's going to be interesting. But it's also going to be interesting to see how they take Kirk Cousins back because he was very successful there, with the exception of they didn't win a lot of games in the playoffs. And that's always been Kirk Cousins, the negative to him, right? He doesn't win big games, doesn't win primetime games. And the other game that's big is Week 17 at Washington, another team that he played on, right? And look, Washington hasn't had a quarterback since he left until now. Now they have Jaden Daniels, but look at that gap. They let him go because they kept just franchise tagging him instead of signing him to a long-term extension. And they could have been more relevant over the last few years than what they've been. Although now they have different ownership. The ownership is awful. Um, player to win the award, I'm with you. Bijan Robinson, Offensive Player of the Year, but also Kirk Cousins, Comeback Player of the Year. There's a lot
yeah,
of guys that are injured that are coming back. It's going to be interesting because there's going to be a lot of guys in the running for that. Because there were a lot of big name guys that are usually Pro Bowl caliber players that were hurt or miss a lot of time that are coming back. Um, and obviously, hopefully, they don't get hurt again because we want to see good talent, right? We want to see these guys play.
yeah.
Um, but anyway, that's Atlanta. So we'll go to the last one, which I'm probably going to spend about 30 seconds talking about. It's
Yeah.
Carolina. Their strength of schedule is tied for 29th at 467. So to give you an idea, 4 of the bottom 6 teams in strength of schedule are the NFC South. The other 2 teams are the Bears and the Chargers. Okay. So that's how bad the South was and how easy their schedule is this year compared to based on last year's win percentage. Carolina's over under is a whopping 5.5, which I thought was high. I think it's lower now, but we're going by what it started at, and the
Yeah.
baseline was 5.5. So go ahead.
It's going to be under. And the thing that I feel bad about with them is Bryce Young is being compared to CJ Stroud,
Mm-hmm.
but it's almost like if you want to compare 2 car racers, but one had a Ferrari and the other one had a Jetta. It's Bryce. I'm not saying Bryce Young is as good as CJ Stroud. I think in a league like this, if you have the bigger, stronger athlete at quarterback, he's going to more than likely be better. You know, that's just the way sports goes, right? And Bryce Young he's a smaller guy, but he's not as bad as people. He's a very good quarterback that played behind a porous offensive line. Um, but it's going to be a rough year. It's going to be a rough year. There's not much talent on that team, and hope is that he can grow in size a little bit more. Uh, battle a little bit more this year. Maybe they can get a little bit more put for around him the following season, and then he can really start to begin to show what he has. I mean, he probably with more talent in Alabama than he's going to play with last year and this year. I'm joking when I say because
Well,
they're
compared to,
player.
yeah, compared to other teams, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But they're going to be. I mean, we agree that they might be the worst NFC team in the league. Like it's between them and the Saints probably, and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think the Saints have more talent. They're just older.
Yeah, yeah,
I think the Cardinals have more talent too. 'Cause
I do too.
I think the Cardinals
And
they got a little bit more talent, I think. But yeah,
they
those
do.
teams
But
are all
the only
there's
reason I
one
brought
bad team in each division because I don't
yeah,
think the Giants are
well,
very good, but they have good defensive players.
and the reason I brought up the Saints and the Cardinals was because those are two teams that have potential for their quarterbacks to be out for the year.
Hmm.
So,
Oh, yeah.
you know, that's kind of when you consider the talent, that's kind of the thing that kind of could make it equal footing, but they're not going to be a good team. And I know people who are Panther fans, so sorry guys, but they're going to definitely go under. I guess you could say a game to watch for them is
To me, it's obvious. There's only one.
okay. Now I'm interested to hear, but because there wasn't one on their schedule that really stuck out to me. Um, yeah, I could. I mean, I get there's teams you could watch them play to watch the other team, but there's not there. There wasn't one to me that was noteworthy as far as to both teams, unless you want to say the second time they play the Saints because that may determine who's going to be last in the division.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then as far as I'm not even gonna spend any time talking about who could win a war because nobody's winning anything.
Yeah. Look, I got them going under two. The two games that I think they realistically have a 50-50 or better shot of winning other than the Saints. I think they'll probably split with the Saints.
Hmm.
The other two games that they may win um, are against the Giants. It's neutral. It's one of those Europe games. Europe, I think they're in Europe. And home against Arizona in Week 16, because to your point,
Yeah,
Kyler might be out by then. Um, and then maybe they just get somebody on a bad day. That still only gives them 4. Yeah. Um, yeah, man. I mean, they're not going to beat any of the. I mean, they do get the Broncos, but it is in Denver, I think.
yeah,
Um, I, they could win that one. So maybe they get 4, maybe they get 5, but 5.5. I just don't see it. Look, I give them some credit. At least they're trying to put pieces around him. They traded for Deontay Johnson. He's
hmm,
a better wide receiver than they had last year. They drafted a wide receiver in the first round.
yeah. I actually kind
Um,
of like.
I like Xavier Legette. I think he's a good
Yeah.
wide receiver. Look, if you're a stud wide receiver in the SEC, you play some good defense.
Yes.
They're good defense. You're playing against, and when you're the number one, you're playing against an NFL corner probably half of the time.
Yeah.
Um, they apparently Miles Sanders said that they have new coaching staff and everything, and Miles
Yeah.
Sanders said the atmosphere is a lot better. Which I mean, when you're 2-15, I don't know how it could be any kind of positivity. But he said that going into training camp last year versus this year, he said it's a night and day.
Hmm.
Maybe they're trending towards the right direction. I agree with you though. They're still, I mean, years away from being relevant. The game to watch for me was obvious. It's Week 5 at Chicago. It's the last two number one picks playing against each other.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's a big storyline. Obviously, to your point, the drafting completely different situations. Caleb Williams is being drafted into more of a CJ Stroud situation, although
Hmm.
with veteran receivers.
Yeah.
Probably the best situation a number one overall quarterback could get into ever. I'd
Hmm.
have to look back and go through the annals of history to verify that. But I mean, God, talk about having some weapons. But Chicago's gonna win that game. But you get to see them play against each other, and we talked about it before. Quarterbacks don't play each other, but there is still some sense of that 1 versus 1. Both won Heisman's, both were number one picks,
Hmm.
and they were back-to-back Heisman's. Right? They won the Heisman the year before they left. Player to win an award, look, their best player, I think, is Derek Brown, defensive tackle, but he's not a passer. He had 100 tackles as a defensive tackle. That is insane.
Yes.
The guy's a beast. I like J.C. Horn, but he hasn't been healthy yet. But I picked Xavier Legette as offensive rookie of the year. I, again, don't think he's going to win it, but
Mm-mm.
I guess if he probably has the best odds of any player on the Panthers to win something. I guess their coach could win Coach of the Year if they somehow won 7 games.
No.
Because honestly, they're looked at as so bad. If they somehow pulled out that many wins, I would vote for them. I don't care if they didn't make the playoffs, but I don't think that's happening. Yeah, they're bad. They're going to get a top 5. At least they get to keep their first round pick this year, though.
There we go. There's a plus.
That is going to go down, especially if they never build enough around Bryce Young for him to be successful. That is going to go down as there's been a lot of bad trades, but that's going to go down. And if Caleb Williams ends up being as good as people think he will be and wins MVPs, wins Super Bowls,
Yeah.
or one of each, or whatever, that's going to go down as arguably the worst trade in NFL history.
I'll tell you a guy who you said before, the first pick who basically walked into the building with a lot of offensive talent, Andrew Luck.
Yeah, but they didn't. That was not as much as what the Bears got, because Harrison wasn't there anymore.
Who?
Reggie Wayne was towards the end of his career. I mean, they got DJ Moore,
We still
prime DJ Moore. They
Yeah,
drafted a
but I
wide
mean,
receiver top 10. They got a
yeah,
running back in his 5th year with not a lot of mileage on him, who's an elite playmaker. And then they got Keenan Allen. Yeah, he's on the back end of his career, but is still, like I said, he's as close to the Hall of Fame as you get without being a Hall of Famer.
yeah, that's basically Reggie Wayne.
Yes, but then they also have DJ Moore in his prime.
Yeah, I
The
give you that.
Colts didn't, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
And they didn't have
I mean, I think
the I can't
they
remember
end
who
up
the
winning
running
11
back was.
games. I think they ended
Well,
up winning 11 games his
yeah.
first year. Yeah.
Well, they went from Peyton Manning to I don't even remember who their quarterback was. They went through 3 or 4 guys that year, I think,
Yeah.
to then Andrew Luck. I mean, and Andrew Luck could have went out the year before and been the number 1 pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, you got anything else to add on the NFC South?
Yeah.
All right. Thank y'all for joining us. Episode 16. We got one more division to go, and then we're done with our predictions. Week 1 preseason is this weekend, so a lot of exciting football. A lot of guys have already been announced they're not playing or are playing, so it's going to be interesting. We wanted to get these out before preseason, before we really get to see these teams play. So it really is more of a prediction. But thank y'all for joining us. Have a good one.
Take care.